So here's the final phase. I mean, we talk now about stimulation and just a little conversation. So Pravinda, my wife, and myself, we regularly have a little discussion amongst ourselves, and we talk about the current affairs within our now. You know, the current things that are happening now with, let's say, BLM, and then all of a sudden it becomes VALM, you know, Black Lives Matter, then it becomes V, All Lives Matter. Each one has their own issues of being hijacked, and we spoke about this last week, so I won't forget that conversation. But I'm not going to reintroduce that. But I just want to understand that I had a very good conversation with a friend of mine whose name was Nick Haynes as well. And he's the founder of the 5 Institute, which is also an energy, a 5 energy healing scenario with reference to Chinese medicines. So myself and him, we speak quite regularly on the discussion that we have with reference to psychometrics and the crossover between psychometrics and energies. So one of his posts that he put in only last week, I was really proud because he sent it over to me and said, what's your thoughts on this? Because logically, he has a viewpoint of the world, possibly his viewpoint of the world. Obviously, each and every one of us has a personal viewpoint of the world. His version of the world is of a Caucasian viewpoint. And he basically was so humbled by saying one thing to the world, because it was a statement from his own head. He said, I am an unconscious, and I'm going to, please understand, this is not to braille anybody, just rile anybody up. Have a think about this. I am an unconscious racist. And that was very, very deep. And his point was that we all have unconscious biases. Now, him and myself had this long discussion many a time, about 5-6 years ago. We used to talk about unconscious biases that we've been installed as a child or in a community. Does that make sense? Where we grew up and wake up, etc. So without going too deep into that, his point was that I'm an unconscious racist, that I don't necessarily see the viewpoint of somebody else, and I don't even know when I'm being a racist inside. Does that make sense? I don't know whether I'm me personally, I don't know whether I'm being racially biased to a person of color. And by the way, that within itself, I did a lovely podcast with Sarah Shervani, who I'll send a link out very shortly to everybody. And we discussed this there as well, that the subscription to the sheer fact that you're saying that there is such a thing as a person of color and a person of non-color, that within itself is accepting that position in the first place. We call this, we call it unconsented influence. Now, but the point I'm trying to say is a little discussion on this, the unconscious biases. He didn't even realize he had the biases until he had a self-reflection moment when he was feeling, oh, that's not real, all lives matter, or that's not real, BLM matters, you know, Black Lives Matter, which both camps are absolutely spot on and each have their own hijacked left and right wing flows. But my point here, the thugs are the thugs, that's got nothing to do with it. We're looking at the real people here. What is everybody's view upon an unconscious bias? Has anybody actually noticed their own unconscious biases that they can actually identify and actually give them a chance to possibly resolve it and see another point of view? So out to the team.
Yeah, my kind of first conscious experience of that was actually when I was around 16 years old, when I used to do martial arts, and went to a kickboxing class, and we're waiting outside the lesson. And this was the first time I was like mind blown. Like, it was one of those things that you're speaking about, you didn't even realize it. And we had a very mixed class of people, right? A very mixed class. It was really, really good. But we're waiting outside, and all of a sudden, while through conversation, somebody just pointed out, saying, "Oh, look, you know, all the Indians in one place, all the white people in one place, all the black people standing in one place." And I looked around, and my jaw just dropped. Like, what on earth is going on here? Like, how did that even happen? How did that even come about? But inside the club, we're just like, everybody just mixing and mingling and fighting. But yet outside, we were standing in groups. It was just weird. It was like, how on earth did that happen? And that was my first experience of thinking, where does this come from? Like, why do we think about these? Or how does it happen? And when are we doing it? Like, when we don't even know we're doing it. And it doesn't mean that you're racist or anything, but it's just that kind of conditioning about what's going on in those moments. So that was my first experience of that, and I kind of understand what Nick was talking about there. So yeah, interesting.
Yeah, that's so amazing, Jatinder. I remember watching a documentary on babies, I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago, and they were trying to look at look at the unconscious bias of race. And so white English babies, they were in a room, and then two ladies came into the room. First, a white English lady, and then an Asian British lady. But all the children navigated towards the white English lady because it looked like their mum. So that didn't mean that these babies who are like 6 months old, 8 months old, they're not racist. It's just that they had a familiarity to seeing a white English lady, which was their mum. So that was interesting. But I think really any kind of discrimination is kind of a taught discrimination. So from being a sociology background, it's the fact that we are products of our own socialization, of our own culture. So whether that be, you know, someone who has been brought up, say for example, Tommy Robinson, imagine that kind of socialization. I don't know if he's got children. What are the children unconsciously experiencing? They're imbibing culture. So that's why I think it is definitely unconscious. But then when the child grows up, they're taught things. But it's until you get, you know, like you were saying to Tinder when you were 16, 17, the connections join up. And it's like, I'll tell you a funny story. Sorry to take time, but growing up in West Bridgford, Nottingham, lovely area, multicultural. I was walking down the street with my brother, and he was about 12, I was about 11. And from a distance, we saw this like a skinhead, and all of a sudden we heard, "Oh, you, the P word, go back to where you came from." So I looked at my brother, and I looked back and I was like, who's he speaking to? And I didn't realize that that was a racial slur, but I've been brought up in a multicultural society where we didn't realize there was any difference or discrimination between anyone. And I just thought, wow. So it's powerful unconscious bias if it's gone the wrong way. So yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to take this on a slightly different tack, just because that's what I like to do. There's also unconscious bias in who you then connect with depending on where you were born. And I'll tell you for why, it's accents and things. Now, I am automatically drawn to people with the Midlands accent because I'm from Birmingham. So when Hardeep was talking earlier, I messaged him, said, which part of the Midlands are you from? Even when I'm abroad, when I'm away, if I hear that twang, it's like, oh, hang on, that's somebody from home. So you automatically go towards what you know. It doesn't have to be with skin color. It doesn't have to be Indian or Pakistani or Bengali. It's a Brummy accent, and that's a comforting thing to me. So it's going to somewhere where you find comfort, where you think you're going to find comfort.
Yeah,
so me, I'm automatically drawn to Hardeep because he's from the Midlands.
Yeah, brilliant. You see, this is unconsciousness. It's truly, truly amazing. Thank you, Manjeet.
And well, this is just to expand on Jatinder's point. When they were filming the original film of Planet of the Apes, they actually noticed that when the cast went to actually sit down for dinner, and bearing in mind they're all in full makeup because it would take them 4 hours to get on and 4 hours to get off again, so they couldn't just like whip it off for lunch. And they found that all the different sort of all the different apes, so they had gorillas, chimps, and orangutans, and they again would just sit on their own tables. They wouldn't mix, which it was very weird that just sort of the makeup would just allocate sort of where you were going to go. It was very, 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 very strange.
Amazing.
It's interesting, that isn't it? It's like it's like your brain seeks out familiarity. Just because it knows. Yeah.
Talking about the kind of the unconscious bias, I think it affects people in many ways, whether it be the police might pull over a certain person of a skin type, extra questions are asked of a person that other people wouldn't have questions asked for. An example of that happened 3 o'clock this afternoon, actually, with me and my wife. We were just in the shop buying some stuff, and she has a blue light card as a member of the NHS. And when she showed her card, the woman said, "Oh, do you have another form of ID?" Now, she had a NHS lanyard on with her ID on it, and it's the first time she's ever been asked that. And even when the woman kind of asked, called us over to the counter, it was almost very, she couldn't make eye contact. It was very, very strange. And then we started having this conversation in the car about these kind of biases where certain people won't be asked extra questions. If a person of a skin color had an NHS badge and they showed the blue light card, they probably wouldn't be asked that. But the things we started listing down, the stereotypes, oh, it must be Asian, so maybe they're trying to pull a scam. Or maybe if it's a black person, they get followed around the store a lot more, and it might not be consciously. It's the fear that people feel about certain kind of skin types, and they don't realize they're even doing it. And I think that's the unconscious part of it, that some people are aware of it, but a lot of people aren't. And I think it just automatically ingrained in them. So yeah, it's an interesting point that some people are aware of it, but a lot of people aren't.
So just to give you some feedback, I mean, I'm not sure whether you noticed, to give you my version of it, if I may, if you can really see, I've got my beard open. So I don't trim my beard as a Sikh. So my beard is open. I absolutely get a different response when I have my beard open to when I have my beard packed. Rather importantly, interesting, isn't it? So we have unconscious biases. Sometimes I turn up like this, sometimes I don't turn up like this. Sometimes I can go into a commercial environment with my beard packed or with my beard open, and I get a different response every time. So each time it's very consistent. When I have my beard open, I have more reluctance to engage me. And when I have my beard done and packed, I have more acceptance and engagement. Interesting, isn't it? By the way, this is not about host society, non-host society, white, black, pink, purple. No, this is about unconscious biases. This is about consented influences. It's about the book, which is Who Rules the World by Noam Chomsky. It's about the information that we read. We automatically have to have a viewpoint on it. Very important to understand. If I read an article, watched a TV episode, or actually watched a news report, the moment I've ingested that information and read it, I have to have a viewpoint on this immediately. So either I'm going to agree or disagree in the simplest form, but every one of these is what we call a 3-degree, or in this modern day, a 1-degree movement. So if you look at social network or social neuropaths, then the engine itself, if you look at Facebook, they will show you one image that you agree with, and then they'll show you another image that moves 1 degree in points of view to move you just that little bit unconsciously. And then it will take you to there, to there, to there. And each one of them will be easy steps to move you towards something. Now, the answer to this question is evidence when you have a person like Trump who runs the American presidency. So everybody moves with a little bit of influence, bit by bit, until you get to a situation when you're completely 180 degrees from where you originally were. And you're unaware of this. Your unconscious biases have been tainted. Positive or negative doesn't matter. Yeah, you could be Tommy Robinson, who has a complete right-wing view. But if somebody showed him a video image consistently at one day, he might decide that his view is not valuable to the world. I just want to share that if I could. It's very important to understand that. Please read a couple of books. There's something I would like to leave here, because in case everybody disappears, in the chat, there's a lady called Jane Elliott. I shared her video, I think, on a marketing spam on WhatsApp. And she, in 1968, did an experiment with children, Jane Elliott, where this is so impressive to see and understand, where she basically helped individuals to understand racism, yeah, from a fundamental core point, to understand it in a very simple understanding. She had children, 1968, all around first, in the junior school here in the UK. And she basically put out, in the morning, everybody came in as normal, they all had friends, and she basically turned around and said, blue eyes and brown eyes, okay? She said, everybody who has brown eye has to wear this collar. Anybody who has blue eyes is cleverer, etc. You really want to watch this. If anybody wants that video, reach out to me on WhatsApp and I'll send it to you. I have it saved on my phone to share. And she basically created a hierarchy for blue-eyed individuals on Monday, or was it Tuesday? She then went through every single thing that the identification or the time availability for the brown eyes was restricted. They couldn't sit on the same table. They had a different school menu. They had everything that was entitled. They walked around with this collar, everything identified in that principle. And all the thing is, the whole thing was an experiment to just explain to children to understand the unconscious biases that they could be inflicted upon from society. So here we had a lovely conversation. She then turned around on day 2, and what she found was basically day 1, sorry, the blue-eyed individuals in the afternoon were actually feeling they were cleverer, and they were picking on the brown-eyed individuals, picking on their face and picking on how stupid they were and all those things. On the Tuesday, when everybody came back in the morning, she turned around and told them all, oh, by the way, I made a mistake and I got it wrong. Actually, the brown-eyeds are the ones who are the clever ones, who this and that. And then she moved the blue eyes with the collar. And what was amazing is there was a 7-year-old child who one day had thick glasses. He was blue-eyed. And on Tuesday, he came in the morning. This is just really inspiring to everybody to understand, unconscious understanding. He can't see the blackboard with his glasses, without his glasses. He came on Tuesday without his glasses to prove, to show at first glance that he was blue-eyed. Because all of a sudden, he wanted to show off the fact that he was blue-eyed. That made him clever. That made him amazing. That made him the preferred individual. So the next morning, she asked him, she goes, whatever his name was, John, where's your glasses? And he goes, oh, I forgot them at home. And then she went on and said, by the way, all the blue-eyeds are the silly ones and all the brown-eyeds are the ones. And you really need to watch this. It's amazing. If you want to read it, please go. But if not, just Google her name, Jane Elliott. Tremendous. And then Parvinder, she turned around and gave me lots of other links to her as well. She's been on Oprah in 1992. She's got her own movement, her own structure. And you want to see the Oprah episode, 1992, Jane Elliott. Have a look at what happens. And they split them and treat the audience differently. And they don't tell them what's going on. It's inspiring. So the opportunity there is just to understand that possibly, I'm going to end it here for everybody, that we have unconscious biases that we bring to the world with ourselves. The first thing that we all need to do is learn ourselves and be forever evolving, learning beings and celestial energies. Has anybody got anything else to add to that before we end?
I just want to make two really quick observations, and it was kind of my own unconscious bias, I guess, and how we're influenced. So I guess my own unconscious bias that I noticed today was where someone on Instagram had gotten a conversation about Jesus and how Jesus is depicted as a white person, but he was actually brown or black. And then and I was watching this, but then I started thinking about, okay, so if I saw a picture of Jesus and he was brown, or let's just stick to brown because I'm brown, would I have that same respect for him, or would I? And you know what? I was sad, and I thought, actually, I wouldn't. There is an element inside of me that I would think a little bit of negativity, and it's quite, I'm really into looking at ourselves and going, okay, where are we biased? And so I did put a link on the group where I put the Harvard test where you can go on there and find out your own biases. If you believe you're not biased, it will definitely show how biased we can be. And my last little point was that how we are society. I think that it's how we perceive things also influences our biases, because for example, I have a friend who's got I've got certain friends who've got turbans and beards. What makes me slightly different to their experiences when they go into really predominantly white areas is I believe in Sikh privilege. So I've got this kind of thing about Sikh privilege is where people see a Sikh, they trust them. So I kind of use that to my advantage. And I think in my career, it works because it doesn't matter who you are. It's people sort of trust me. Whereas my friends who don't have that belief, they have very different experiences when they turn up in places like that. They are insecure and they behave differently and they have a very different experience. So I just thought I'll just add that in there.
So it's interesting that people are talking about biases now, whereas in medicine and medical research, we're very, very aware of our own personal biases, and we're actually trained during research to eliminate any kind of bias. So when you're doing research, whatever kind of research it is, there might be an element of design bias, how you're designing the research. There may be an element of selection bias, how you're selecting the patients, how you're measuring. There's a measurement bias as well. And I think what I'm trying to say is maybe look inside yourselves and see, yeah, even though you might have a certain type of bias, to recognize the different elements to that particular bias as well. That it might be interesting for you to even read something. I can't remember the name of the book, but I think it's Freakonomics.
Yeah, Freakonomics is, I've read that book as well. So Freakonomics covers a little bit of bias, and it covers economy as well. So it's really, yeah, great book. Thank you. Thanks, Klaus. That's a really valid point. I'm just worrying about everybody's timing here, nothing else. So anybody else would like to say the last few words? I think Dill asked a question very quickly. Did it make a difference in the assessment with the blue eyes and the brown eyes with what they thought the intelligence was? The answer is yes. And the performance did change 100%. It did. What happened is the people who had brown eyes actually thought themselves dimmer, and the people with the red eyes, blue eyes, sorry, actually thought themselves dimmer, and then cleverer, and then they switched the next day. And it actually had more of an adverse effect on the blue-eyed ones on the second day, when they were told actually it was an error and you guys are the silly ones, for example. So it had an immediate problem there. So Dill, quickly if you can, yeah?
Yeah, so Tom Billy talks about how we think ourselves to be clever, and he says we should have a learning mindset in terms of, it's not about how clever you are, it's can you learn new skills. So that's a really interesting concept to think about going forward.
Well done, well done. And that basically is maintaining ego, because ego is the one that dims you off, right? That's how it is.
It is such a big subject.
Yeah, but I'd love to say a few words.
So many elements that have come out that I've recognised in our discussions in the past. I've probably got nothing new to add on it just at this moment. Thank you.
Repeat it, it's fine, just share. We're switching off for the weekend.
I think I've just switched off.
That's welcome. Okay, team, I'm not joking. See, would you like to say something? Parwinder, you wanted to say something, Parwinder?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate what Rav said as well. It's like sometimes our perception and what we're thinking has an impact on that bias as well. So it's interesting to see how if we feel that we're going to be racially attacked, or well, maybe that's not great, but if we feel that something is going to happen, then we're also bringing that within us, in our environment as well. And the second thing, it was an interesting thing between my nephews, the twins, and one of them used to not work, but he would be really smart and just breeze through everything. And the other one would have to work really hard. And then he ended up, they have this tool that's Rock Stars, that they have a game where they do maths on it. And it's brilliant, because then he would get up every morning and do this because he wanted to be the best at it. And really, like, he became really good at maths, whereas the other one was really good at maths. And then one day recently, he said to me, oh, he's smarter than me because he can do TT Rock Stars. And I said to him, well, hang on a minute, you were the one that could do it really well before, but all of a sudden now he believes that he's smarter and he can do it. So that's have an impact on where he feels he is on that scale.
Amazing.
Yeah, got the intelligence.
Amazing. Environment learnt. It's amazing. So last person, Manjeet. Thank you very much, Parwinder. Manjeet.
Yeah, very quickly. I'm going to pick up something that Kos was saying, because it kind of ticked off things in my head from an IT perspective, because that's my background. Is that in IT, we have a group of people who design something, and then somebody else is going to build an application or product or what it is. But then we get another group of people to test it, to remove that bias. Otherwise, because you've put the whole thing together, you're not going to see any inefficiencies or deficiencies within that product. So we get another group of people to have a look at it. So you take your rose-tinted glasses off, and somebody else then looks at it from a completely different perspective. So, you know, it's biases everywhere. It's how you then deal with that bias, how you remove that bias to move forward is going to be the best way.
Yeah. Truly, becoming aware, I'm going to leave it with this loving last statement, becoming aware of self is the actual journey. That's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to understand who we are, what we are. It's about self. And we call this a call to self. Something within the Synergist method I say all the time. It's about a call to self for each and every one of us to be aware of oneself, to see how did I engage somebody, how could I engage differently. Now, if anybody here is one of our Synergist practitioners who's been through the whole DISC process, and there's a handful of you here, you'll understand the best way to know yourself scientifically is doing a DISC assessment. And in specific, I'm unashamedly going to say to yourself, we've been trying all DISC assessments, the one which is the superior one, which is inspireduniversity.com/DISC. I think we put a link in earlier on, but please, honestly, it's the best investment you can ever make for yourself. Anybody who attends these events, who does buy one of those assessments, it's an assessment, not a test. I will personally go through for free. I'll go through the actual process with yourself. And that's what Lisa did only this week. And that's what she was saying, how she had these epiphanies about learning self. So my advice and my request to everybody, please learn yourself.